Why is it nice and chilly today? Are you chilly? Hi everybody and welcome to this week's video from KTTV. Last week I did a video on Richard, and it was an old video from 2016, and it hit quite a lot of analyticals. The best watched video, the best number of subscribers increased because of it. So this week I was approached by one of those people who viewed the video regarding the encouragement they got to invest in an infill plane. And so there are a number of things that you should be looking out for if you plan to go down that route. So rather than telling everybody individually what to look out for, I thought this week it would be a good idea to film with Alfie, even though it's freezing cold down here this week, to film a short video on what to do with and what to look out for with regards to purchasing an infill plane for your work. Now, I'm in a lucky position, as are most Brits, that infill planes in the sort of mid 1800s proliferated throughout Great Britain and not so much in other countries. There are a few colonies where you'll find them, like Australia, Africa, and some in America, but they are less common. So I think the first thing to be aware of, that if you're not in the UK, then it's something that might either cost you a little bit more money, or you're lucky enough to find one of the rare examples. So this week I'm going to go through the various ways in which you can acquire one of these. Now, they're not necessarily going to be beyond people's budget. People feel that they need to get a named brand, and examples of that are the spears here. And funny enough, this was in an example that I was assisting one of the viewers this week looking for a similar plane. Two examples were available on eBay. They were around about the £100 to £200 mark, which these days isn't a vast amount of money for what you get. Now, I paid £250 for this. I would say probably it's not a collector's example, but it's a fair example of a Stuart Spears plane, which is, in my opinion, the top maker of the more popular makers. So you've got Norris, you've got Spears, you've got Towel, you've got Holland, various makers, some Slater. Alfie's gone to sit by the door because it's slightly warmer. You're going to come back here? Come on, up here. Come on, up here and cuddle. Dear, oh dear. Yep. So you've got quite a few makers now. Spears, Holland, Towel, Norris, all of those tended to be more upmarket. So they were dovetail construction, and so the two distinctions you've got are dovetail construction of the actual sole and the body, and or castings. Now, the top maker of castings, in fact the most prolific maker of castings, was Slater in Clerkenwell in London, and a lot of other makers bought his castings and infilled them, put an iron in and put their branding on them. So as I say, this is a dovetailed example, and you can get dovetailed examples around below the £200 mark. Obviously they're heavy, so shipping costs to another country would be, particularly America, would be quite expensive. But when you weigh that against what you get for this particular type of plane, then you're getting great value for money. I've sharpened this plane up, and I'll be inserting a video in this video of this example being used. These are just some examples. This one's the Spears that I got from David Barron. It's tuned to sharp, obviously, but it's set fairly coarse. So I'll just flatten Absolutely effortlessly shaving relatively normal shavings, so you could dimension a piece with this particular plane, and it's a really nice, as I say, it cost me 250 quid, probably a bit more now, but it is cut in the condition that a collector would be interested in. So that's your first avenue. eBay, auction houses throughout Britain are the most common way of finding this type of plane. If you're lucky enough and you live in England and you look at the boot fairs and your your various antique shops, you might find one, but they're becoming very sought after now, and most dealers know what they're worth. So that's option number one. Now, I mentioned castings, and castings can vary quite considerably. The thing you have to watch about castings, as opposed to the softer malleable steel, which is the dovetail one, is that castings can be very brittle, and particularly in the heel, when you're looking at a casting, you can find cracks. Now, there are cracks in castings that don't affect your tool if you're going to use it as a user. So this particular one is a very early Slater. It is completely cast, including the wedge pocket there. There's no bridge, there's two wings, and it's a wedge shape, and it has a Sorby iron, a John Sorby iron, and it was probably about 50-60 pound, and it has quite a large crack in the front there, and on the heel as well, where people have hit it, but the sole is perfect. Now, the most important part of the sole is anyone can lap it and flatten it, and that's what this is done. You can see there's quite a considerable dip in the casting in the middle there, but that's irrelevant. The three places that are important are the toe, the heel, and the very leading edge of the mouth. Those three places are the most important to look out for when you're looking at, say, an auction online. Look at the sole predominantly, because you can get away with a certain amount of cracking on the casting, and you can get away with a certain amount of damage to the infills. But what you can't get away with is damage, quite considerable damage, which can be done to the mouth with the casting. And this is the old vintage, one of the early castings from Slater in Clerkenwell in London. It has an Isorby iron and a wedge, and it's casting, and this is set relatively fine for smoothing. And as you can see, it produces really nice shavings. It was very cheap. It's cracked at the front, cracked at the back, and but it's still an excellent user. And it does have some historical significance in terms of Slater work. Castings vary. That's a very old one. So historically, that's a Slater that came very early. This is a later Slater, and it has a very fine mouth on it, and it's a beautiful condition casting, and it was rebranded by Tyzac of London, which is a tool dealer, and they go back many generations, and it has it came with a Norris iron, which is possibly a new addition, but it has a Norris cap iron as well, and it suits the plane, and it might be that Norris would sell these during a period. You do see some relabeled Buck, which were Norris, and they're very easy to identify, because the casting is like a coffin, but it's actually square parallel sides, and then it drops back like that with a very distinct transition. But this is a fine example. You can really tell fine examples. It has a lever cap which is beautifully beveled. And I'm trying to get close-ups of this, but I will put some close-up pictures hopefully in the video afterwards. And this is a really fine user for a smoothing plane. So this is the Tizak smoother, which is really nice. It's a tiny little smoother. It's a smaller size than you'd normally get an Infill. It's beautifully sized for doing small things like just smoothing off the edge of this piece of wood here. Really fairly fine shavings and leaving a very smooth surface. So I think this one was, when I got it, was about 80 quid, but that was a bit of luck more than anything. It is a collector's quality. And that's the other thing we need to consider. What work do you do? If you're predominantly doing cabinet work and panels and doors and things like that, window frames, then and any furniture in general, then it's probably worth considering a panel plane. I mentioned panel planes being almost just multitasking, because the panel planes can produce a very fine smoothed surface, so that kind of negates the need to smooth them afterwards. And depending on their quality, like Mr. Tween, who I mentioned last week, which is an amazing panel plane, and this came to me, no maker's name. It is a casting, and as such is not as valuable. But there's nothing wrong with a casting if it's in good condition, and this one is absolutely perfect condition. The iron is super sharp here, and it produces wonderful shavings, and they are baby bottom smooth. So when you're planing a panel or even a board, then the surface that remains is usable straight to finish. It's if it's tuned correctly, you shouldn't get any tear out, you shouldn't get any roughness, and you shouldn't need to smooth it. So if you're doing small to medium work and even large work, the panel plane is the kind of one. It's a jack of all trades. It's the jack of the Infill planes. And as I say, this one was quite cheap. It was less than £100. And it just had no maker on it, and that's probably why. But looking at it, you're looking at some of the beautiful styling at this. Look at the beveling on it. Look at the lever cap and the knob, particularly on the lever cap. Look at the knurling, and look at the styling of the handle and the bun at the front. And it's even got a strike button on the top. So whoever made this, and I think it was a very talented user, mate. But it could be Entwistle. It was a bargain, and you do get them, and you can look out for them. And because they haven't got Spears on them or Norris on them, they tend to go considerably cheaper. So it is worth looking out for these. You will not get any difference in the finish from this plane to a Norris. It is they are both of equal quality. So bear that in mind, because the characteristics of an Infill plane that make them so beautiful to use for a cabinet maker and joiner is the fact that they are really quite heavy. They have a very heavy, usually iron, thick iron, and so they plough through the wood beautifully. And if they're sharp, you get a very easy cut, a very smooth cut, and the shavings you can get down to gossamer thin. You can get very cheap ones, and there was one of two Spears this week that I spoke to the gentleman who was interested in buying one and bit the bullet in the end, and he bought one where the entire handle was missing. Now, there are things when you call the plane a basket case or a restoration project that are showstoppers. And as I say, cracks in the sole chips in the sole and the leading edge of the mouth particularly. The back end doesn't matter so much, but the leading edge is the bit that's going to bend up and cut your fibres. So that is very important. This one came with it came with a lever cap, which is Scottish shield pattern. It didn't come with an iron, and it didn't come with a knob. So it was probably about 40-50 quid to buy. But it did have a rather interesting worn bun on it, and it's not your stereotypical bun, but it's immensely comfortable. So I think it's probably either a user that's got the plane and made it that way, or the bun was damaged and they've shaped it this way. I made the knob. That's not an easy thing to do without a lathe. You do need a lathe, but I'm sure that people can find friends with lathes if they don't have one in the workshop.
This is the basket case I got. It had no iron, no cap iron, no screw. Very, very much a basket case, and it costs very little money. It is a casting, it's not dovetailed, but the mouth is not damaged. So therefore it was restorable. So with the addition of a fairly modern iron and a cap iron and making of the screw on the top there, which is just one of my early examples, it cuts beautifully. And again, set fairly coarse. And run out of wood too.
So this was a very cheap example. It took very little to restore. I just bought a modern iron and a parallel iron. You don't need a tapered iron with a lever cap. You do need a tapered iron. Well, there's a bone of contention about whether you need one, but usually wedged infills come with a tapered iron. So that's your second option. So you can buy an expensive one, which is basically a collector's quality, spend the money, and it comes ready to go. You just need to sharpen it. You can buy basket cases and get into the game of infill planes. Once you get one, it's a very slippery slope. You will see the benefits of it. The three things I said: it has impetus, it moves very easily through the wood, it is quite a heavy item, it is usually coming with a very thick iron, and they just have mojo, they have antiquity, beauty, unique beauty of their own. And the third way to do it is make it yourself. And okay, I didn't think I could make one myself. It is a project that is probably you certainly learn while you're doing it, but I've known people that have never made infill planes before make very, very good first attempts at doing it. And you can practice, particularly if you're doing dovetails on metal work. It's not that difficult once you get it, but it is difficult to conceive right at the beginning. And there are some techniques and tips that you can use to actually end up without gaps and so on and so forth. But having gaps in dovetails in metal is not a showstopper. It's just an ego thing. You know, some people get upset when they've got gaps in the dovetail. They hold together just as well, and it's a very strong joint in steel and bronze. So this one is a steel sole, dovetailed and infilled in what was probably the most difficult part. I stupidly chose oak, bur oak, to use. Don't do that. It's silly. It looks beautiful. I did it for a purpose. However, you know, choose a wood like mahogany, which is relatively available, sapele, an equivalent. It can be coloured to look like rosewood, and very attractive wood. And any other woods, boxwood particularly, is a very hard wood, but very enduring wood. But it is relatively easy to work. This is an example of a Scottish smoother. I only got the base. Now the body was damaged behind the rise here, and so that was cut back. The cracks were cut back and made into a beveled V shape, and that actually means it's an attractive user now. It is undamaged in all other ways. The sole, particularly, as I said. Come up here, Alfie. Come and see everybody. Why are you crying? You're too cold. I'll take you in a minute. So I infilled this overstuffed, which is a bit of a pain in the neck, but it means the wood sits over the edge of the metal. It is, particularly in a casting, a difficult thing to do. Inside of a casting is almost impossible to refine without a milling machine, and then even then you can't get right up to the edge, and so the casting tends to be rough inside. So a big tip there is to leave it shy of the base and the sides, and insert it in a bed of epoxy. Traditionally, it would have been inserted in a bed of tar or some form of shellac to stick the infills in place and stop them moving. And then, of course, they're reinforced with screws all along. This will survive any drops, I should think, barring major ones. And you can get planes that are damaged quite badly, like the ubiquitous Spears handled plane, and a lot of these exist. This one has been repaired, but the rosewood, however many times you repair it, it'll actually crack by just pulling it, because it's 200 years old and it's very brittle. And the way I've dealt with this one is I've drilled a hole here and drilled it all the way through, put a very coarse IKEA bed screw all the way through in epoxy, and then just bunged the end up so you can hardly see there's any, but that's reinforced it now and that won't break. And you know, you can pick these up for in the region of £80, usually damaged by that damage, but it's relatively easy to fix. And I've got an article on that coming up, a reprint of a previous article that I did on step-by-step repairing this type of plane, which you find quite a lot of. It's a Spears coffin infilled dovetail smoother, and quite a nice looking plane, and good user. So in summary, I think the infill planes, once you get one, you'll start to see the benefits of it, and how much more usable it is, and how much more fun and a pleasure to use it is, over and above modern planes, particularly modern Bailey style planes, even expensive Bailey style planes. Would be hard pushed to beat the quality of an infill plane. Once you get one, you'll see you know, how it performs. There are specialist planes that you can get if you, say, for instance, are into making pianos. This is a piano plane. I think it's American. Very, very, very low angle infill plane, and used to flatten the tops of piano lids, grand pianos, and so on. It is just to make very fine cuts across the very dimpled surfaces of a board, or like I say, a piano top, so you can get a mirror finish on the lacquer afterwards. Without this, you would get undulations in the plane. So it was used principally for making grand pianos. And I have a couple of these in the museum, but these are very much specialist planes. You have to be very careful on the base of these, because the steel is very thin across the rear of the mouth, and they can easily push out. This wedged example that I have is an example where that has happened. There you can see the wedge has pushed out. They've literally banged it in too hard and cracked the steel. I just JB welded it and just rubbed it down, flattened the sole, and it's a great user. It's not a collector now, sadly, because someone has misused it. So yes, definitely go out and look for an infill plane. If you're a carpenter or a joiner and you want to experience all the tools that are available to you, find somebody who's got one, or get a cheap one. And also, getting a cheap one that needs doing up, needs restoring, is very useful, because it teaches you the geometry of the plane. It teaches you how to make handles, how to make wedges if the wedge is missing, if you have a lathe, how to make knobs for the lever caps and so on. So don't discard ones that look beyond economic repair. Have a look at them and seriously consider them and decide whether or not you're capable of restoring them. And don't sell yourself short. They're very easy processes. And I've done quite a few articles on all of those aspects of restoring damaged and old antique infill planes. And just following along with the pictures and the description, you can easily do it yourself. If you're a woodworker of any stage in your experience, try it, attempt it. It's certainly a lot easier to restore an infill plane than it is to get perfect dovetails. Trust me, I know I can't get perfect dovetails in wood, but yeah, go for it. And once the learning vortex has been set up, there will be many articles all collated together in one place that will give you the opportunity to use as the library, so that you can assist yourself when you're buying one that needs restoration, and give you the confidence to restore it yourself. Also, on groups like the Unplugged Woodworker group, there are people like myself and other plane makers that would happily give you assistance should you need it in terms of restoring your own purchase. So go for it. Anyway, that's the video this week, and I'm going to be inserting some pictures during this video and inserting some at the end, some examples of previous planes that I've made in video and in pictures. And hopefully, if you watch it till the end and you've survived till the end of this video, you will bite the bullet and get yourself an infill plane. You won't ever regret getting an infill plane, and it will always go up in value as they get scarcer and scarcer. So as an investment, it's a good idea, and as a user, it's a good idea. So why not try? Next week we'll be dealing with something completely different, so join me on KTTV, and for the rest of the week, have fun, enjoy your woodworking, and see you next time.